You want to be referred to as Pascal or Dr. Wallish?
Pascal is fine. I serve as a clinical professor of data science, neuroscience, and psychology at NYU. And yeah, I'm interested in a variety of human cognition, yes.
Tell us the story of how you first heard about the dress. Where were you, and what did you initially think?
So this was February 27, 2015. And it was a Thursday, and I was coming home from work on the train. So I think it was browsing Twitter. A student had sent me on a DM, hey, what do you think about this? So I was teaching psychology at the time, perception specifically. And honestly, I dismissed it. I was like, I clearly saw it as white and gold. And then I went home and told my wife how silly people are online and showed her the image. And I saw it clearly white and gold. And she, straight up told me, she looked me right in the eye and said, well, it's obviously black and blue. And that's the moment I meant, like when I was like, what?
And so for people who don't know about this, who missed this phenomenon,
Hard to believe, but sure.
Tell the story of the dress.
Oh, okay, so...
And where did this photo come from?
Yeah, it all began with Cecilia Blaisdell. Her daughter was getting married, and on the occasion of getting married, they were obviously shopping for wedding dresses, yes? They didn't actually buy any that day, I think, because there were so many options. So they took pictures of them to review offline. And as they were themselves reviewing the footage, they got into a fight of what color this dress was. Was it black and blue or was it white and gold? Mm-hmm. And they couldn't resolve it. And then they consulted, friends, and this reached larger circles until one of the band members that's playing at the wedding put it online. And the rest is history, as they would say.
So this image of a dress that some people saw as obviously black and blue, some people saw as clearly white and gold, became viral. Can you describe just how widespread it became?
Yeah, so to my knowledge, this was, at the time at least, the most viral thing, period. It quickly reached Wired, who had reposted it, and then BuzzFeed, who was still a thing back then, who reposted it, and everybody reposted it, and celebrities got into it. Rogan had a take on it. Everybody had a take on this, everybody.
I'm interested too so this dress meme wasn't just a pop sensation. It was taken scientifically seriously. It seems to have been somewhat defining for you as a phenomenon.
The moment where I realized that this is real, I was like, yeah, we need a bigger boat. This is it did reshape my research, yes, absolutely.
So why did you find it so shocking and puzzling for the science that you gained your expertise in?
That very fact, that you have an image and we can all agree on the wavelengths and the pixels and all of that, and yet the gestalt looks very different depending on your assumptions about it. So in other words, what this shows you in a very nice way is that you bring a lot of yourself to every perceptual and probably cognitive interaction.
I remember people being pissed about it. It kind of created this anger response. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think most people believe the world is the way it is because that's the way they see it. And this obviously challenges that notion. I'm not saying that everything's relative and we all have equally valid positions. That's actually not true. I'm not saying that. There is obviously an objective reality out there. All I'm saying is what this shows you, our brain filters objective reality for you.
Because the weird thing is that the dress, it's not like it was just the color of the dress was just in the eyes of the beholder. The dress actually did have a color.
If you saw my Wired video, I have the dress. So the dress is black and blue under normal lighting conditions. There's no question about that. The argument is about, and a lot of people didn't get this, is about this specific image of the dress. The lighting is ambiguous, so it actually is ambiguous what's going on. It was a flash, it was overexposed, it was a cell phone, it was backlit.
Was it inside? Was it outside?
Yeah, it was unclear. We actually studied that. Some people in our study thought it was inside, some people it was outside. So that was unclear.
Right, it seems like the disagreement about the dress was because a lot of the context for the image was missing. We don't know where it was taken.
That's right.
What the lighting could be. And therefore, people had to make assumptions to fill in the gaps of the...
Let's say we disagree. I'm arguing about your entire backstory of assumptions and what words mean, and that's all in the room of us. You just can't see it. This is human nature. So to jump to conclusions and to assume that if someone else jumps to a different conclusion, that they're wrong and that you're right. There's this interface between reality, which is objective, and what you perceive. Well, maybe we should take that seriously, that this interface might be different in different people, which is why different people see or hear different things. This is not just about the dress. This is much bigger than that. If this is happening here, maybe this is also happening in general. There's much deeper implications from this.
Welcome to Human Nature Odyssey, a podcast exploring our modern world, our ancient past, and where the two meet. I'm Alex Leff. This episode begins the third season of Human Nature Odyssey. Glad to have you here. All right, so in the last 3 episodes of season 2, we talked about the history of the left and right political spectrum, the debate between hierarchy and egalitarianism, democracy and authoritarianism that's been raging over the last 250 years. But 250 years is nothing compared to the grand scheme of human history. All the way back in season 1 of the podcast, we talked about our hunter-gatherer origins and the major shift that happened with the agricultural revolution 10,000 years ago. So you might be thinking, what kind of freaking podcast is this anyway? Are we talking about modern politics, or are we talking about hunter-gatherers? Well, my friend, this is a podcast where we can talk about both. In this episode, we're going to try and bridge the gap between our modern political and economic history with our hunter-gatherer origins. You ready for this? Okay. Hang on tight. It's going to be one bumpy ride. Actually, it's not going to be that bumpy. I'm hoping it's going to be pretty smooth and easy. In 2008, psychologist Jonathan Haidt gave a TED Talk on how our psychological tendencies can predict our politics. He starts by telling the story of 2 dudes going to see Michelangelo's statue of David.
Suppose that 2 American friends are traveling together in Italy. They go to see Michelangelo's David, and when they finally come face to face with the statue, they both freeze dead in their tracks.
You ever see the statue of David? You know, the curly-haired guy, chiseled into marble, just chilling in the nude. One guy is in awe of the statue's beauty, and the other guy is embarrassed by the statue's penis, just flopped out there for all to see. Now, Haidt says the American political stereotypes would tell us that the guy appreciating the art is more likely to have voted for the relatively socially liberal Democratic candidate, and the guy embarrassed is more likely to have voted for the relatively socially conservative Republican candidate. Haidt tells the audience these aren't just stereotypes. It's reflective of what research has shown, that people who vote for left-leaning liberal candidates tend to be more open to new experiences than people who vote for right-leaning conservative candidates. As Haidt explains,
It really is a fact that liberals are much higher than conservatives on a major personality trait called openness to experience. People who are high on openness to experience just crave novelty, variety, diversity, new ideas, travel. People low on it like things that are familiar, that are safe and dependable.
he quotes researcher Robert McCrae.
The main researcher of this trait, Robert McCrae, says that open individuals have an affinity for liberal, progressive, left-wing political views. They like a society which is open and changing. Whereas closed individuals prefer conservative, traditional, right-wing views.
Apparently, that's what the data shows. But this obviously wouldn't apply to everyone. There are liberals who value tradition and conservatives who seek novelty. And I gotta imagine the point is not really about whether you vibe with Renaissance art or David's cute little penis specifically, but whether you have an initial draw or revulsion to new experiences. Essentially, what Haidt is trying to demonstrate is that some people just inherently have a tendency towards new experiences, and others have a tendency towards the familiar. If that's true, the debate between liberals and conservatives really seems like a debate between those who value change and those who value tradition. You ever see Fiddler on the Roof? It's a musical set in the quiet Jewish shtetl of Anatevka, Russia, not unlike the village my great-great-grandparents would have been born in back in the old country. The story begins with Tevye, a patriarch of the town, breaking the fourth wall and talking directly to us, telling us all about his village, how hard yet simple life is, and most importantly, the value of tradition. In fact, he even breaks out into song. Tradition, tradition. For copyright purposes, I can't sing the rest of the song, and also this isn't a musical podcast. I'm sorry. But in this opening song, Tevye explains, here in Anatevka, we have traditions for everything. How to sleep, how to eat, how to work, how to wear clothes. Tradition even explains the proper role of each member of the family. The men, he tells us, sings us, must work and provide for their family. The women, Tevye croons, are to raise the children and run the home. Life is hard in rural Russia, especially for the Jewish peasants who were often not welcome. And tradition, Tevye informs us, is how they survive. Good luck trying to find a culture without tradition. Rituals, customs, roles, expectations. Traditions are like a guidebook for society. Traditions mean that new generations don't have to figure out how to live from scratch. The concept of tradition is kind of like that dress on the internet. Some might hear it and think, well, of course tradition is a good thing, if only we stuck to them. Others might hear it and cringe. Tradition? Ugh, feels so restrictive and limiting and backwards. But regardless of whether you feel a pull towards tradition or not, let's give the conservative argument for tradition its credit. There's a lot going for tradition. Tradition is like chess. The rules have been honed over a very long time. Chess is a fun game because the rules all make sense as a system. I bet if you tried to make up a new board game on the spot, it would have a lot of issues that need to be worked out. This is called Lindy's Law, that something already long-standing is more likely to survive into the future than a recent trend. For something to become a tradition, it has to have gone through a sort of filtering process that preserves what works and gets rid of what doesn't. Whatever you come up with today hasn't had time to cook and mature. Therefore, the systems we've inherited should be stronger than whatever cockamamie ideas some hipster came up with last week. We can see this reflected in nature as well. The older an ecosystem, the stabler it usually is. Tradition 1, change 0. But if you like tradition, don't get cocky just yet. There is tradition in nature. There's also a lot of change. Individual mutations are a necessary part of life. In fact, it's the only way an organism can adapt. Okay, that's 1 point for change. When tradition and change both work together, ecosystems are stronger and more adaptable. So the same is probably true for culture too, right? Cultures need a balance of tradition and change. And some traditions are more sturdy than others. If everyone has a say and different concerns and perspectives can be addressed, I imagine that's going to make a pretty good tradition in the long run. But some traditions are built on wobbly legs. A tradition created by kings and aristocrats might work great for kings and aristocrats, but probably isn't too ideal for the peasants forced to participate. If a tradition is too resistant to change and other people's opinions, then it becomes more and more brittle until it breaks. After all, the French monarchy existed for 1,000 years, but was constantly riddled with peasant uprisings that were ignored or squashed until finally, in 1789, peasants stormed the Bastille, grabbed King Louis XVI and his wife Marie Antoinette, and sent them to the guillotine. Towards the end of his TED Talk, Jonathan Haidt remarks on how
once you see that liberals and conservatives both have something to contribute, that they form a balance on change versus stability, then I think the way is open to step outside the moral matrix.
Haidt then connects this to the wisdom of many Eastern religions, like Buddhism's concept of yin and yang, and two of the main gods in Hinduism, Vishnu the Preserver and Shiva the Destroyer. So, we all have natural inclinations to either favor tradition or favor change, but we shouldn't be too blinded by those inclinations. Like, what's the actual value of that tradition, or the value of the change? Because here's a very important question. What exactly are we considering traditional?
All these kids on TikTok these days. I've never even been on TikTok. All my friends post pictures of their kids on Facebook. Facebook is good enough for me.
TikTok? Facebook? Is that what you whippersnappers are calling it these days? I remember the good old days when TikTok was just the sound a clock made, and a book was something you read with your face. No siree, that's too much liberal change for me. I know, I'm a bit of a conservative. I value tradition. That's why I use MySpace.
Traditional conservative values are relative, right? It depends on where you're starting your history. Again, it's like the dress on the internet. What color you thought the dress was depended on the context. The same is true of tradition. So the question is, what is the context of a tradition? Take something like private property, for instance. Is private property a conservative tradition? Well, as my colleagues over at the Crazy Town podcast pointed out in an episode they recently re-aired, up until 1773, most English peasants collectively shared their common spaces and decided as a community how to settle disputes, who farmed what land, who could hunt what. But then, the English Enclosure Act of 1773 privatized those commons for the first time. And as you can imagine, while the lords were big fans of this innovation, it was very upsetting to many peasants. When you assume that private property is the norm, then calling for the abolition of private property sounds pretty dang radical. But in reality, if traditional conservative values just mean being in line with the past, then in the grand scheme of things, private property is the radical new thing that's been implemented only relatively recently. After all, for most of human history, there was no private ownership of land. So, in this case, what would be the conservative move? What would be the liberal move? Where's that music coming from? This isn't in the script.
Yes, hello. This is Jeffopoulos, reporting live for a new segment, The State of Civilization.
What is happening?
I'm here to cover the absolutely fantastic news coming out of modern civilization right now.
Really?
That's right. Things are just great. In fact, they've never been better.
What's going on?
You haven't heard? Well, global literacy is on the rise. Child mortality is at an all-time low. Modern medicine has helped prevent or cure countless of once deadly diseases. And there hasn't been an all-out war between the major world powers in 80 years. From space exploration to instant global communication, humanity is achieving more than ever before. Civilization is killing it.
Oh, wow, that is good news. I thought we were in way more trouble than that. I feel like a lot of people are not having a very good time right now.
Well, yes, there are some downsides, and not everyone can experience the perks. But, just don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it. What are the downsides?
Well, wealth inequality worldwide continues to rise, power is consolidating into fewer and fewer hands, and the entire foundation of modern civilization is built on an ever-expanding extraction of natural resources that, unless seriously addressed at its root causes, will inevitably lead to a complete collapse and widespread calamity for the world's population, the likes of which will be difficult if not impossible to recover from. Life as we know it may come to an end. But hey, I told you civilization was killing it!
Jesus. I mean, the downsides seem pretty important.
Not really. I don't know. I haven't thought about it too much. I like to keep things positive.
Yeah, I get it, but you're a journalist, right?
Sure am. Communications degree at Civilization U back in the early aughts. Those were the days.
I feel like you should look a little deeper into the state of civilization. It would probably be useful information.
You know, Alex, you're right. I'm gonna get right on that. There's no scoop too heavy for Jeffopolis. I'm gonna do some real honest digging, and I'll let you know what I find.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it. Man. Okay. Where were we? Oh, right. What is tradition? Some things we think are traditional, like private property, are really much newer than we realize. But just because something's new doesn't mean it's bad. Humans are adaptable. We can adapt to all sorts of things. We can eat kale from our garden, or we can eat Doritos. But just because we can eat Doritos doesn't mean they're the healthiest option for us, and that a Doritos-based diet wouldn't come with some side effects. Some foods satisfy our biological needs more than others. The traditional Inuit diet of whale blubber and seal meat, or the traditional Polynesian diet of fruits and nuts and fish, are going to lead to much healthier people than diets based on deep-fried fast food and processed sugars. And if some diets are healthier for us than others, what if the same is true for kinds of societies? Like, what if some economic and political systems are better suited for human beings? For example, all humans like to laugh. A government that bans laughter is probably ill-suited to our natural laughing needs, right? A government that allows laughter, that's probably a preferable government. But how else would we know which economic and political systems work well for humans? Well, this might be where the conservative inclination can help us out. Is there a tradition that helped humans survive, thrive, and spread across the entire planet? It's like what the Lindy effect says. Whatever exists for a long time probably means there was a reason it was so successful. Well, what if I told you there actually is a tradition that humans lived with for a long time? And I'm talking about a really long time, like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years long time. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans lived in small foraging communities. We evolved as hunter-gatherers. We were generally nomadic, lived off the land, and didn't have too many material possessions. Now, you might scoff at this.
Oh, yeah, great. Hunter-gatherers. Come on. What kind of primitive society is that?
Well, hold on just 1 second. I even heard some of you conservatives scoff at this. But isn't that kind of funny? Because if you value tradition, then isn't it possible that there might just be something we could learn from the hunter-gatherer tradition. Isn't that the wisdom of conservatism? I mean, private property, a few hundred years old, that's a tradition, I guess. But if we wanted to look for a real tradition, something that we know worked for a very, very long time, that some communities still practice to this very day, I mean, I don't know. Seems like hunting and gathering is a pretty fair tradition to look back on. If you zoom out enough, hunter-gatherers start to look like the real conservatives, and their values look like the real traditional values. And don't worry, I'm not saying we all pick up a bow and arrow and go become a hunter-gatherer. Hunting and gathering for all your food requires a far lower population density than a planet of 8 billion people can allow. But what about the kinds of societies hunter-gatherers lived in? If small-scale foraging societies worked for hundreds of thousands of years, is there anything they could teach us about what economic and political structures are better suited to us as human beings? Recently, documentary filmmaker Ken Burns went on Joe Rogan's podcast to talk about his new series on the Revolutionary War.
They're uttering this war cry that they have adapted from the Cherokee, from Native American tribes, which is a yell that will reverberate in southern battlefields for decades.
Wow.
Wow is right.
I love Ken Burns, and I love Ken Burns films. We even went to the same experimental college in Western Massachusetts. Not at the same time. The dude's like 40 years older than me. But Ken Burns was telling Joe Rogan that for all of human history, there was always this authoritarian ruler until the American Revolution changed that.
We invented that. Everybody up until the point of our revolution were subjects. The whole history of human beings is like, okay, I'm going to be under the boot of an authoritarian. That's my lot. The greatest thing that we invented was the idea that we could govern ourselves, that we would no longer be under the boot of an authoritarian master who had just set himself up.
But that's not really the full picture. Sure, since the agricultural revolution, most civilizations have been ruled by pharaohs, lords, kings. But long before the American Revolution and before the agricultural revolution, hunter-gatherer societies were far more politically and economically egalitarian. Archaeologist Robert Kelly defines egalitarian societies as, quote, those in which everyone has equal access to food, to the technology needed to acquire resources, and to the paths leading to prestige, unquote. That doesn't necessarily mean everyone has the exact same stuff, but everyone at least has access to the essentials, and a say in how things are decided. Now, there are instances where top-down leadership is necessary. We can imagine that in certain emergency situations that require quick decision-making, it's helpful to follow one leader. You don't want too many cooks in the kitchen, bickering over choices while danger closes in. That's what my friend Nick always said when we worked for this theater company together. He used those theater productions as examples for how the whole non-hierarchical, egalitarian thing doesn't work. He'd make the point that it really helped that we had a boss, a director with a vision who could give clear instructions. Without one, nothing will get done. And I agree. That kind of leadership can be very helpful. But there's a big difference between a director and a dictator. It's kind of like how leadership works in sports. Michael Jordan may be the team captain, but he's not the king. During the game, he can tell you to pass the ball, but he can't make you do it. And once the game's over, he's not going to follow you home and make you brush your teeth. But that's theater and basketball. What about government? Could societies really be that functional without one strong, permanent leader? Everybody's got to have a leader, right? In our stories about aliens, What's the first thing we always assume aliens would say when they come down to Earth?
Take me to your leader.
But maybe that's only because that's what the English colonists said when they landed in North America. When the English first settled in the land they conveniently named New England, like the aliens of our stories, they told the native Algonquins, "Take us to your leader." But for many of the native people, who their leader wasn't so simple. Among the Algonquin tribes, who practiced a mix of hunting, gathering, and subsistence agriculture, some individual people did seem more influential than others. At first, the English assumed these were the Algonquin kings and queens. But the English soon realized these kings and queens were quite different from the ones they knew back home. In 1634, settler William Wood observed, quote, "The kings have not many laws to command by." Yeah, bro, maybe that's because they're not kings. The Algonquin had a different word for their leaders, that to the English sounded like sachem. As historian William Cronin wrote, quote, "None of these were the sole speakers for their nation. Each nation had multiple sachems. A sachem, who could either be male or female, asserted authority only in consultation with other powerful individuals in the village." In 1648, fur trader William Pynchon came to an Algonquin village and reported, quote, "There are several small sachems, and in all near places there are other small sachems. No one sachem doth rule all. I believe they will stick no longer to him than the sun shines upon it." Not only were the sachem's power limited and shared with others, but if you didn't like your local sachem, you could leave and go to a group with a leader you preferred. But from the English perspective, this was not going to work. It's like if aliens landed on Earth, asked to see our leader, and we responded, "Well, we got lots of leaders, and they don't really speak for all of us." That might confuse and irritate the aliens. It certainly pissed off the English. They wanted a single ruler that could be held responsible for all their subjects. So the English passed colonial laws declaring, quote, "Some principal Indian be appointed and declared to be the sachem of them, to whom the English can report when wrongs are done by Indians. In case the Indians do not agree, the court may appoint and declare some men to be their chief or sachem." But before the English came in and turned sachems into kings, the sachem leadership had been much more like theater directors and basketball captains. Their leadership was limited, flexible, and temporary. This kind of loose leadership wasn't unique to the Algonquin, but demonstrated in hunter-gatherer societies around the world. And this sort of egalitarianism, as Robert Kelly explains, quote, "requires effort." Anthropologist James Woodburn, who lived with the Hadza people of Tanzania, agreed, quote, "Hunter-gatherers are not passively egalitarian, but are actively so. They are fiercely egalitarian, having to work at resisting their own and others' tendencies to dominate through rigorously enforced norms that prevent any individual or group from acquiring more status, authority, or resources than others." But this is where the classic critique comes in right on cue. Okay, I know what this is. Go ahead, tell me how life was just peaches and cream for hunters and gatherers with your little noble savage theory. Well, actually, author Christopher Ryan, who we talked to in the last episode, points out how the label noble savage didn't originally mean noble in the sense of being more moral or just, but noble in the sense of aristocratic nobility. Those same English colonists, first encountering Native Americans, couldn't help but notice how much more leisure time and personal freedom they had, as well as an unhindered access to the entire landscape. Back in England, if you wanted freedom, free time, and access to land like that, you had to be part of the nobility. Hence the term noble savage. Because Europe had been a land of kings for so long, these more egalitarian native societies were initially shocking to them. But those examples of egalitarian societies may have influenced Europeans more than they would have liked to admit. In part 1 of our recent King is Dead, Now What series, episode 12, go check it out, we talked about the French Revolution, when peasants overthrew the 1,000-year-old monarchy. To debate what to do next, there was a national assembly that divided itself into a literal left wing and right wing of the room, which is where we get the terms left wing and right wing. Terms like liberal and conservative came soon after. Those who sat on the right wing argued for reinstating the monarchy. Those who sat on the left wing argued for a more egalitarian society. These left-wingers were labeled radicals. Are you guys seriously trying to upend 1,000 years of tradition? The conservative tendency of honoring tradition did not like that one bit. But are you catching the irony here? If we follow the conservative impulse to honor tradition and go back in time long enough to incorporate our more egalitarian hunter-gatherer origins, tradition starts to sound a lot like what the so-called radical left wing was arguing for. But hold your horses. The left wing shouldn't get too giddy just yet either. Egalitarianism might have worked for small-scale hunter-gatherers, but what if you're trying to do large-scale civilization? The right wing of the French National Assembly argued that hierarchy and class are essential to a functioning society. And I will say, if you look at the history of civilization, that does seem to be the case. After all, most civilizations, from ancient Egypt, China, Rome, you name it, relied on a system of the very rich and the very poor. And that wasn't just an accident, but how those civilizations were so dominant. Think about it. Who's going to build all those pyramids and fight in all your armies? I'll tell you right now, it's not going to be the rich and powerful. Someone's got to do all the menial tasks to keep civilization running. If everyone is well fed and taken care of, why would anyone want to waste their limited time on this earth hauling bricks in the hot sun all day? Poverty is an excellent motivator. As Patrick Calhoun, founder of the modern police force in London, wrote in 1806, quote, "Poverty is a most necessary and indispensable ingredient in society, without which nations and communities cannot exist in a state of civilization. Without poverty, there could be no labor, there could be no riches, no refinement, no comfort, and no benefit to those who may be possessed of wealth." But not everyone believed it had to be this way. Karl Marx certainly didn't think so. Not only did we not need kings, Marx argued, but we didn't even need the wealthy. Inspired by the left-wing calls for egalitarianism, he advocated for a system called communism. As Marx described it in 1875, quote, "From each according to his ability, to each according to his needs." That was the idea, at least. And in 1917, there was the Russian Revolution, and communism finally found a home base in the brand new Soviet Union. In part 2 of the King is Dead series, episode 13, go check it out, we talked about the Cold War, when the Soviet Union tried to prove that communism was superior to that other economic system the West was so obsessed with, capitalism. But, spoiler alert, the Soviet Union collapsed, and communism proved to be no match for capitalism. Why is that? Maybe capitalism just works better than communism? But what do we mean by working? As ancient Egypt, China, and Rome showed us, to win at civilization, you need to economically and militarily dominate other countries. To do that, you're gonna need an unbelievably enormous amount of raw materials to be chopped, dredged, and mined from the earth. To do that, most people are going to have to spend their lives doing the most menial, soul-sucking, dangerous jobs imaginable. If poverty is an excellent motivator, then by concentrating wealth in fewer and fewer hands, maximizing profit instead of compensating for labor, capitalism is really dang good at, let's just say, motivating people to do those jobs. Communism can't motivate people like that. If we're asking which economic model is the best suited for civilization, capitalism may take the cake and sell it back to you for profit and add ingredients that give you diabetes. But what exactly is capitalism? We usually say capitalism began around the time Adam Smith coined the term back in 1776, but there wasn't really one clear start to capitalism. Capitalism isn't like communism. There wasn't a manifesto or a revolution or one day when capitalism was installed. No one really had to try to make capitalism happen. When Adam Smith came up with the term capitalism, he wasn't inventing a system. He was just describing what he saw happening. Because, in a sense, capitalism wasn't a change of course from what came before, but just further down that direction. As authors like Lewis Hyde and Robin Wall Kimmerer have explained, hunter-gatherer and indigenous economies emphasize reciprocity and gift-giving. In contrast, civilizations tend to treat resources and labor primarily as commodities to be bought and sold. Capitalism, seeing everything as a commodity, or capital, was the path of least resistance. Capitalism is going with civilization's flow. The Soviet Union tried to stop that flow and build something else. Communism was like a big metaphorical dam the Soviet Union built in the river of capital. Which is ironic because dam building is a classic civilizational move. Civilization loves building dams to assert control. But dams eventually burst. The forces of civilization's market economy were too powerful, and along with its own internal problems, the Soviet Union collapsed. A dam is just trying to control the flow of water. It's not stopping the source of water itself. And likewise, Soviet-style communism was trying to control the flow of capital, but wasn't addressing its sources, surplus, stored wealth, and hierarchy itself. Plus, was the Soviet Union's version of communism even egalitarian? The Soviet Union was an authoritarian state, whose elite class ruled over the commoners. The average person had very little personal freedom. I'm not sure that's what Karl Marx had in mind. It goes to show just how hard it is to create an egalitarian society under the confines of large-scale civilization. So, capitalism and communism may seem like the ultimate economic beef, but hey, guys, listen, I gotta say, I know you're all focused on the ways you two are different, like how under capitalism, businesses own the means of production, whereas under communism, the government owns the means of production. But, I don't know. You guys might have more in common than you're willing to admit. Both of you, capitalism and communism, are built on the same obsession with progress. What kind of progress? More technology and more industry, duh. Both you guys love talking about development, modernization, mass production. You didn't agree who should run the factories, but you were both totally on the same page that there should be factories, and lots of them. In 1991, around the fall of the Soviet Union, author Helena Norberg Hodge wrote that, quote, "Progress has reached an advanced stage in many parts of the world. Wherever we look, we can see its inexorable logic at work, replacing people with machines, substituting global markets for local interdependence. In this light, even the differences between communism and capitalism seem almost irrelevant. Both have grown out of the same worldview, which places human beings apart from and above the rest of creation. Both assume that it is possible to go on stretching natural resources indefinitely, the only significant point of difference being how to divide them up. And author Fred Ho also wrote about how capitalism and communism both took for granted the, quote, inevitability of technocentrism and industrialism. Just like capitalist countries, the Soviet Union built their own coal mines, nuclear weapons, intensive space programs, and fought their own imperialist wars. I said it all the way back in episode 2, and I'll say it again. By the 1980s, the Soviet Union was responsible for 1.5 times the air pollution as the US was at the time. In other words, communism didn't reject the civilizational system. It just wanted to run that system differently. Communism, whether under the Soviet Union, China, or Cuba, didn't challenge the idea of industrialization and unlimited growth. And capitalism seems to be way better at generating those things. But how's that industrial expansion and whole unlimited growth thing working out for us?
Yes, hello, thank you, Alex. I'm Jeff Opolis, and this is The State of Civilization. I'm coming to you live with some breaking news.
Breaking news? Okay. What do you got?
Well, I'm standing here right outside of civilization, and there seems to be some significant signs of distress.
All right, Jeff, what are you seeing?
Yes, according to the UN Refugee Agency, the number of people displaced from war, violence, and persecution has doubled in the last decade and is continuing to climb. The World Health Organization reports that over 700 million people are going hungry. That's 1 in 11 people worldwide. Not to mention the damage being caused to the natural world at large. Industrial activity is causing the decline of bee pollinator populations, crucial to the existence of fruits and vegetables. The oceans are acidifying. Ice caps are melting. About 1/5 of the Amazon rainforest has been cut down. There's a giant island of trash and plastic floating in the Pacific Ocean, the size of Texas.
The size of Texas?
Yes, Alex. Or the size of 2 Germanys. Oh, and also, another headline for you.
Lay it on me.
As of 2020, there is more anthropogenic mass than biomass on all of planet Earth.
Wait, what do you mean?
That means if you add up all the weight of human material output, like concrete, metal, and plastic, then it weighs more than all the organic material, like trees, rocks, and elephants combined.
That's a lot of human-made mass.
It is, Alex. The global economy is growing at such a rate that even with a switch to renewable energy, the world's resources will face serious depletion by the end of the century, all without halting the rapid decline in biodiversity, if not even accelerating it. Scientists warn we're in the midst of a mass extinction of life on Earth, the scale of which the planet has not seen since the demise of the dinosaurs 65 million years ago.
Oh my god.
I'm sorry. I'm being told that, yes, okay. I'm receiving reports that record numbers of podcast listeners are migrating from Human Nature Odyssey to more light and carefree shows like true crime serial killer podcasts.
What? That made the news?
It's a lot of listeners, Alex. They've just completely gone.
All right, let's stop there.
Are you sure? You don't want to hear about the increasing stockpiling of nuclear weapons?
No, that's fine. We get it.
What about the existential threat of artificial intelligence?
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Man, it almost sounds like civilization's expansion and endless economic growth is leading to the demise of the natural world we depend on, which, ironically, would lead to the collapse of civilization itself. Capitalism is really freaking good at industrial expansion and endless economic growth. But what if those goals are fundamentally incompatible with continuing to exist? What if human and ecological well-being are better goals to have? If so, I'm not so sure capitalism is our best tool in the toolbox for those goals. So, are hunter-gatherers liberals or conservatives? Well, they're conservatives in the sense that small-scale foraging societies are the ultimate traditional society. And they're left-wing in the sense that they're fiercely egalitarian. But obviously, hunter-gatherers are not really either. It's tempting to use modern political labels to understand past societies, but I don't think it's quite right to say hunter-gatherers are like proto-communists. I think we actually have it in reverse. It's not that foraging societies are primitive forms of communism, but communism is a clumsy modern attempt to arrive at some of the same egalitarian results our ancestors enjoyed. So maybe it's not just about capitalism or communism, left versus right, liberal versus conservative. Like that dress on the internet, our perspective and context shapes what we see. But the dress itself wasn't subjective. There are some realities that are inescapable. Sure, your perspective might be different based on your context, but that doesn't change reality itself. Nature has limits, and we ignore them only at our own peril. If industrialization, authoritarianism, hierarchy, and class are all flowing towards our collective demise, then maybe we don't just need a dam to temporarily stop the river, but try and get out of that river altogether. Fortunately for us, we have a pretty good egalitarian tradition to draw from. So next time someone calls you a communist for advocating for egalitarianism, or an anarchist for being against authority, you can tell them, no, I'm a hunter-gathererism. You know, real conservative values. Think of it like this. If everyone is free and has a say, they're not going to want to do the BS required to build industrial civilization. So egalitarianism may not be the most effective way to achieve industrial civilization, but if industrial civilization is inherently self-destructive, and that even communism couldn't escape it, then maybe true egalitarianism might be a wiser choice. Because the kind of equality we find in many hunter-gatherer societies might just be essential for our survival. Thanks for listening. Until next time, I hope you'll consider that if we can't all return to hunting and gathering, how can we adapt that egalitarian wisdom to our present moment? This is where our two-sided psychology might come in handy. Those with a conservative tendency can help recover and preserve what worked for our hunter-gatherer ancestors and contemporaries, while those with the liberal tendency can help us embrace the changes we need now. Seems like a pretty good balance to me. Maybe then we'll learn how to survive and thrive in the centuries to come. If you enjoy Human Nature Odyssey, please share it with a friend. Leave a friendly review, and come say hi on the Human Nature Odyssey Patreon. There you'll have access to bonus episodes, additional thoughts and writings, and audiobook readings. And thanks so much to everyone reaching out on the Patreon, adding your thoughts and comments, or suggestions on what I should explore next. It means a lot, and your support makes this podcast possible. Thank you to Tom, Mark, Charlie, and Nick for your input and feedback on this episode. And a very special thank you to Dr. Pascal Wallish. You can watch my full hour-long interview with Pascal on the Human Nature Odyssey Patreon. Also, additional music for this episode is by Adam Tell. I'll link to his music in the show notes. This episode was produced in part with support from an Omega Action Research grant. Thank you so much to the Omega Resilience Awards for supporting Human Nature Odyssey. This series was made in association with the Post-Carbon Institute. You can learn more at resilience.org. And as always, our theme music is Celestial Soda Pop by Ray Lynch. You can find a link in our show notes. Talk with you soon.
Warning, the following ZipRecruiter radio spot you are about to hear is going to be filled with F words.
When you're hiring, we at ZipRecruiter know you can feel frustrated, forlorn even, like your efforts are futile, and you can spend a fortune trying to find fabulous people only to get flooded with candidates who are just fine. Fortunately, ZipRecruiter figured out how to fix all that. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/zip. With ZipRecruiter, you can forget your frustrations because we find the right people for your roles fast, which is our absolute favorite F word. In fact, 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day.
Fantastic!
So, whether you need to hire 4, 40, or 400 people, get ready to meet first-rate talent. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/zip to try ZipRecruiter for free. Don't forget, that's ZipRecruiter.com/zip. Finally, that's ZipRecruiter.com/zip.
Fall is all about cozy comforts, but when you're prioritizing your health, it's easy to feel like you're missing out. With Hero Bread, you can enjoy all your fall favorites because they're made with Hero Bread sliced bread loaves, tortillas, bagels, dinner rolls, and more. Try their all-new Hero Noodles with 12 grams of protein and just 80 calories. So skip replacing every carb with cauliflower and indulge in your breakfast, lunch, and dinner time favorites while still hitting your goals. From breakfast bagels and meal prepped enchiladas to mouth-watering burgers and cheesy noodles. You won't believe Hero Bread's options have 0 to 5 grams net carbs and are high fiber from the taste and texture. They've even got small batch drops of indulgent favorites like the popular Hero Croissant. And right now, Hero Bread is offering 10% off your order. Go to hero.co and use code FALL25 at checkout. That's fall25 at hero.co. All figures are per serving of Hero Bread. Contains 2 to 18 grams of fat per serving. See the product nutrition panels on hero.co for more information.